My name is Heather B. Moore, and I am here with Mira K. Daniels, and today we are talking about her brand new book, which is Where the Gospel and the 12 Steps Meet, Accessing the Enabling Power of Jesus Christ. So welcome, Mira, and why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Heather. I am excited to be here. I have been a 12-stepper since 1991, and it has nothing to do with my educational background. I have a BS in computer science, but I am who I am today because the Lord has been able to reach me through the process of the 12 steps. I no longer am living in a state of food addiction, and I am no longer living in an active state of codependency. Those things are still part of my life, and I still need to watch for them and be careful that Satan doesn't lead me down one of those paths. But being able to live free from those is a wonderful thing. Part of what has made that possible for me is attending meetings and sponsoring and helping others. So I've attended Al-Anon meetings, I've attended OA meetings, I've attended ARP meetings, and in fact, I've been an addiction recovery program missionary for the church and have run meetings for 14 years.
That is so amazing. And I haven't read the whole book, but I have read parts of it. And I find that your story is very inspiring. And that whenever I've read a book on recovery, addiction recovery, or 12-step book or Al-Anon book, I think it's the stories that really help me relate to the principles. And so I really appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story and making it available to everybody, because it does. Sharing stories, I think, can help us through the hard times in life.
You know, I find that to be so true. In fact, what's different about my book is that it's not just my story, and it's not just about the 12 steps. As I have spent many years sponsoring people and helping them through the 12 steps, the same misunderstandings or need for education about certain principles have come up over and over again. And the Lord has gifted me with metaphors, parables, you might call them, little stories, to help people understand a principle. And in the beginning, I would tell this story to someone when it came to me, when they were struggling with a certain concept. And then it seemed like just within a few weeks after that, somebody else needed to hear the same story. So I would tell them that story. And then eventually I figured out that maybe I should write these stories down and make them available for people. And then I was encouraged to create a blog. So I put them on a blog so I could say, well, go to my blog and look for the story about whatever. And so after a few years, it became apparent that there was enough material to make a book out of it, and that it might be able to help more people if we did that. So that's where this book came from.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about the process of going from the first inklings of maybe I should put this, because it's on your blog, or some of the stories are on your blog, and going from that transition from writing on a blog to, wait, I need to put this into a book. Like, tell us about that.
Well, at first I didn't know if I had enough material to make a book. So I was encouraged by others just to put them on a blog and make them accessible to people. So that's what I did. But as I was more aware of the stories when they came to me, and the metaphors and the parables, and how many there were, I started looking at it, and there were a lot. And I thought, not everybody's going to find my blog. But if I get it into book form, then hopefully we can get it into the hands of people who would really be blessed by this information. So I took the blog posts and I decided, how hard could it be? They're already written, right? So I thought, well, I'll just make a book out of them. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, that is easier said than done. I found that I had to fill in some gaps that I hadn't written about that became apparent were needed. I also found that I had written about certain topics more than once. So I had to decide whether to use one or another or
Mhm.
merge them together or what. And then there was the whole issue of how do you organize them? Like
Yeah.
a blog is just a sequential thing. You just put a new
Mhm.
post up and you don't have to worry about what came before it. There's no arc. There's no, making sense out of it. It's just blog posts. Well, in a book, it needed to be organized into something that would make more sense. And that was actually very interesting process. I If you want to hear the story, I actually did it kind of like the way I used to write papers when I was in college. I would go to the library and I would copy down quotes from books that seemed relevant to the paper I had to write, and I would put them on 3x5 cards. Then I would go home and I would arrange the 3x5 cards into an order that made sense on my bed,
Mhm.
like a big whole bed full of 3x5 cards. And then I would write connecting paragraphs. And that's how I wrote my papers. And it worked pretty well for me. So I thought, well, I need to do something like that. The problem
Mhm.
was that my blog post wouldn't fit on a 3x5 card. So
Right.
what I did was I ended up using PowerPoint, and there's a slide sorter view, and I would copy and paste each blog post onto a PowerPoint slide,
Mhm.
and then I could put them all on my screen in slide sorter view and move them around
Mhm.
until I found an order that made sense. And what I ended up with was there were some that were just about working the steps
Right.
and how we work the steps. And then there were another whole group. Most of them were not about working the steps so much as they were about what it looks like to live in a state of recovery.
Mhm.
And so I ended up kind of grouping them. Part two of my book, which has all the living in recovery posts, was divided into four main chapters: acceptance, surrender, and letting go,
Mhm.
the process of change and growth, overcoming discouragement, resentment, and fear, and living one day at a time in recovery. So once I figured out that they kind of worked together that way, I was able to put them into some sort of an order that made sense, and it began to come together. And then I had a developmental editor that helped me figure out which stuff really didn't belong. And then I had several other people help me by reading it and giving me feedback. The writing process is really much very interesting and much more labor intensive than I had any idea about.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes you obviously feel inspired and motivated and excited and passionate. Um, but once you get your core ideas down, then you have to kind of look at it more in an analytical way and structure and restructure and get feedback and fine tune and tweak. So,
Yeah, this
but
took
yeah,
12 years, I think.
wow, yeah, and I'm sure it's been a journey for you because once you got all of your personal stories in there and then you're structuring around the 12 steps and your own experiences going through that, you're also trying to look at it through the eyes of other people just coming to your book and thinking what is going to help them. I don't know if those who are watching this or those who might be listening can't see this, but the book is actually laid out so that there are wide margins, which means that you can use it as a workbook and take notes and underline and write your own insights, which I love that about this specific book.
And there are questions. Each little post is short, relatively short, a page, sometimes less than a page, sometimes a page and a half, and followed by a couple of questions. And people can just use a notebook to answer the questions and think about what they're doing, or they can get the workbook we're going to have to go as a companion to it. But thinking, one of my biggest fears about writing a book was that, well, people would read it and think, oh, this is great, and then put it aside and nothing would change. And so what I have encouraged people to do, and I hope they will do, is read one segment that's relevant to their journey. It doesn't even have to be in sequential order, and answer the questions and think about how it applies in their life and how they would want to apply that in their life. And then I think people will really be able to use the book to catalyze changing their lives.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will be a wonderful addition for people, whether you're going through recovery yourself or a loved one is, or you want to understand it better. I especially love all the gospel principles you include, because I feel like everyone can benefit from that, is whether we're all struggling with different things in life, that this has a really strong foundation. And it's not the kind of book where you sit down and you read it in a couple weeks. It's a book that you apply to your life, and you can refer to it over and over, and you can spend a Saturday morning or a Sunday afternoon just really deep diving and feeling enriched when you come away from it.
Well, thank you. I hope that one of the things that was important to me is the subtitle, because in accessing the enabling power of Jesus Christ is not something that comes naturally to everyone. I was a member, I was an adult convert, but as a member of the church, I, in the beginning, would ask people how they did that. And people didn't really know. They weren't able to articulate how they were able to do that. They would give me the Sunday school answers, and it just didn't work for me. I tried. I read my scriptures. I prayed. I attended my meetings, but I still felt very distant from God. And I did not feel like I had a connection to Jesus. And so when I found the 12-step program, I realized that really, if you take a good look at the 12 steps, steps 1 through 3 are about how to do faith.
Right.
In a real step-by-step way. 4 through 10 are about how to do repentance. 11 is about the Holy Ghost, and 12 is about missionary work, service, and endure to the end. It was the gospel.
Yeah.
And I found it before the church had an ARP program. So I was kind of, resistant. I knew it was a spiritual program. It had been recommended to me to go try it out, but I wasn't sure it was going to jive with the gospel. But it was a perfect mapping to the gospel. And not only that, it was how to do it. How. That's what I needed. The gospel taught me what. What is my goal? I want to return to the celestial kingdom with my family, to be with God for eternity. The 12 steps taught me how. And that has changed my life.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love it. Well, thank you so much. I just want to encourage everyone to check out your book, and I'm really excited for it to finally be out in the world. I think it's going to bless a lot of lives and enrich a lot of lives. It's going to give a lot of comfort and peace, just like, as you said, the gospel, because they're bringing in these principles that can help us through difficult times. Well, thank you so much, Mira. We will hope that everyone has a great day and a great week, and we'll see you later.